you're feeling as though you've done something that's too much, there's no hope for you, God could never forgive, I want to offer you the life of Abba Moses.
Abba Moses, also known as Moses the Black, was the leader of the great monastic community in Sketis, Egypt. In his early life, he was a slave, a thief, and possibly a murderer. Eventually, he would leave his life behind and become a monk. His spiritual depth and leadership became known throughout the emerging Christian world.
One of the most remarkable and perhaps unexplored dimensions of the story of Abba Moses, the Black, right, is how his life experiences, his biography as a slave, as essentially a hoodlum, a killer, bad guy, that narrative is so consistent with certain forms of literature in the African American experience. That's one dimension of it, right?
His story is different also because for a number of early Christians, early pious Christians, many of them would have come from a life of wealth, relative wealth. Some of them would sell off their wealth and enter into an ascetic life. Moses is different because he came from a life of difficulty, a life of crime, and had this encounter that then transformed him into someone who became, a pious Christian following the faith of their day.
I think about Abba Moses, Moses the Black. Abba Moses, angry at life, angry at God, swimming across the Nile for the joy of terrorizing the peasants who lived on the other side of the Nile.
Abba Moses was a house slave of an administrative official. However, according to his biographer, Abba was relieved of his duties due to his great exasperating behavior and violence for robbery. Wandering in the Egyptian desert, Abba Moses let go of his anger and opened up his heart to God.
So Abba Moses, who starts out as this violent young man and is transformed, he wanders out into the desert because of the weight of his sins. He's aware of the heaviness of what he has done because he's lived such a violent life. And he stumbles onto this group of brothers, Christian brothers, and that transforms him.
Abba Moses goes through what a slave, proletarian, criminal phase of his existence, and then rises to the heights of sort of intellectual, philosophic, and spiritual stature, facilitating and advancing the development of monastic life and having an impact on Christian thought. That's amazing. That story in and of itself.
He spent lots of time with Abba Isidore. And one of the things Abba Isidore asked him to do as he went through this process of transformation, Abba Isidore said, Moses, I want you to stay in your cell. And Abba Moses sat in that room for a long time.
Abba Moses became a living image of a transforming love of Jesus and an example of compassion towards others in the face of ethnic prejudice.
The notion of race in the 4th century is completely different from the notion that we have today. In fact, some will argue that the notion of racism or race today is a completely modern invention.
Abba Moses was also known as Abba Moses the Black. And that is significant because, it is an acknowledgement, if you will, of his, African origin, of his connection with members, the darker-skinned members of the African race.
But when you read the rest of the literature, Abba Moses isn't discussed as a robber and a black man and blah, blah, blah. he is elevated as like the chief among the people. And so I just look at that and say, this is not racial condemnation. And then he grew up and became a hero.
The significance of the monastic life of Abba Moses is in his aesthetic ideals and communal living. Abba Moses became an inspirational teacher for generations of monks and the development of Christian monasticism in the Egyptian desert and beyond.
There are millions of young black boys and others, right, who can identify with this extraordinary, from the depths of slavery to the heights of influencing the religious thought of an entire civilization. That's astonishing.
It's so important for us to talk about the African roots of Christianity. So many young people today, especially young black people, think of Christianity as this European religion, but that is so mistaken. And so it's really important for us, our young people, to know the strength that Christianity brought this man.
Learning about these people is important for me as an African Christian, because that's what I am first before I am a professor. And it is very liberating for me on one level to know that I have spiritual ancestors that are connected to me in terms of my racial identity. And they have made contributions in the past that we all have celebrated and all are a part of, and that we have all benefited from.
Why was it they called him the chief among monks? I think it was because of Abba Moses' own personal transformation that people were attracted to him.
When people are turned brother against brother, sister against sister, when people are turned against one another, we can learn from the life of this African saint. We can learn from his life to look first at our own failings, to struggle with them, and to look with compassion on the weaknesses of others.